The FBI says it has a new lead in one of the most famous unsolved heists in Northwest history. A hijacker dubbed B.B. Cooper jumped out of a Boeing 727 with $200,000 in ransom money. The case has remained unsolved.
The storm that swept over the Pacific Northwest on November 24, 1971, was among the fiercest of that fall. Thanksgiving Eve arrived with relentless rain, gusting winds, and the kind of chill that made wet clothing cling to skin and dampen every movement. At Portland International Airport, travelers hurried under umbrellas, their reflections fracturing in puddles on the polished concourse tiles. Inside the terminal, fluorescent lights hummed in steady monotone, illuminating ticket counters, waiting areas, and concession stands. The atmosphere was normal, routine, almost mundane except for one man moving with measured purpose through the crowd. About 6 feet tall, with olive-toned skin and dark hair combed back neatly. He wore a black business suit, a crisp white shirt, a narrow black clip-on tie, and polished black shoes. In his hands, he carried a brown paper bag and a simple briefcase. There was nothing ostentatious or attention-grabbing about him. He appeared as though he belonged, blending with the post-work, pre-holiday crowd. Yet the calm precision in his movements, how he approached the Northwest Orient Airlines counter, handed over cash, and signed his boarding pass with the name Dan Cooper, would mark the beginning of one of the most studied crimes in American history. At 2:50 p.m., he boarded Flight 305, a Boeing 727 scheduled for a 30-minute flight to Seattle. Once aboard, Cooper chose seat 18C, located near the rear of the plane. For a brief period, nothing about the flight was unusual. Passengers read newspapers, exchanged light conversation, and waited for the plane to level off at cruising altitude. Then, Cooper signaled for flight attendant Florence Schaffner. In her hands, he pressed a folded note concealed within a dollar bill, instructing her to open it immediately. The note read, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me. You are being hijacked." Cooper's demeanor remained calm, almost polite, as Schaffner sat beside him. He cracked open the briefcase slightly, enough for her to see red cylindrical sticks connected to wires and a battery. While the objects resembled explosives, his voice betrayed no panic, no volatility. He then outlined his demand succinctly: $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills, 4 parachutes, 2 front mount, 2 back mount, and a refueled aircraft waiting in Mexico City. The warning was clear. Any attempt to deceive him would result in the bomb being detonated. The crew took the threat seriously. Captain William Scott contacted Seattle via radio, prompting an immediate response from the FBI. When Flight 305 landed at SeaTac around 5:45 p.m., the ransom was prepared: $10,020 bills, photographed and serialized, packed into a heavy canvas bank bag, along with 4 parachutes. Cooper allowed the 35 other passengers to deplane, leaving them dazed but unharmed. He retained 4 crew members: Captain Scott, co-pilot William Ratachak, flight engineer Harold Anderson, and Schaffner, who continued as his primary interlocutor. Even amid the tense situation, Cooper's behavior was courteous and deliberate. He requested meals, smoked Raleigh cigarettes, and apologized for the inconvenience, demonstrating a psychological control and poise that would become one of his signature traits. The plane refueled and departed at 7:40 p.m., heading south. Cooper's instructions demonstrated detailed technical knowledge of the Boeing 727. He instructed that the plane remain under 10,000 feet at speeds below 200 knots, with flaps set to 15 degrees, landing gear deployed, and the cabin unpressurized. Most notably, he ordered the rear air stair to be lowered mid-flight. The crew expressed concern over the safety of such a maneuver. Cooper, calm and informed, explained it was feasible. This detail alone suggested a familiarity with aircraft engineering. He knew the 727's tail stare could deploy in mid-air without catastrophic failure, a fact unknown to many pilots at the time. Between 8 and 8:13 p.m., over the dark, rain-lashed forests of Clark County, Washington, near Ariel, Lake Merwin, and the Lewis River, instruments registered a sudden jolt. Cabin pressure shifted, the aft air stare indicator flickered. Cooper had vanished. He had tied the ransom bag to his body with parachute cord, walked to the rear stair, and stepped into the storm-darkened night. There was no scream, no flare, and no witness to the jump. Only the roar of wind and the sight of the air stair descending remained as evidence of his departure. The conditions outside were near lethal. The plane's altitude exposed him to freezing temperatures, high winds, and heavy rain. Below, dense second-growth forest stretched for miles. Fir, cedar, and hemlock trees capable of fatally injuring anyone who landed improperly. Cooper wore standard civilian clothing, a suit jacket, thin raincoat, dress shoes, and no protective gloves or helmet. The money bag, exceeding 21 pounds, added significant risk. Skydiving professionals later deemed the jump borderline impossible, a nighttime exit, heavily weighted, zero visibility, over uncharted terrain. Yet despite immediate and massive search efforts including FBI agents, National Guard helicopters, Air Force jets, local sheriffs, bloodhounds, and floodlights, there was no trace of Cooper, no body, no parachute, no fragments of fabric or personal effects.
When he got on a plane in Portland, Oregon last night, he was just another passenger who gave his name as D.A. Cooper. But today, after hijacking a Northwest Airlines jet, ransoming the passengers in Seattle, then making a getaway by parachute somewhere between there and Reno, Nevada, the description on one wire service, master criminal.
The immediate law enforcement response was comprehensive. The FBI organized a large-scale ground search across hundreds of square miles, while the Air Force dispatched jet fighters to monitor the area and potential flight paths. Searchlights swept the forest canopy. Bloodhounds attempted to track scents, though rain and wind rendered trails nearly useless. Within days, additional resources, including boats and river patrols, joined the hunt, scanning the Columbia and Lewis rivers. Despite exhaustive efforts, Cooper had seemingly evaporated into the storm.
36 passengers got off the jetliner in Seattle last night, left aboard 4 crew members and the hijacker, dressed in a business suit demanding $200,000 and carrying a plain briefcase which he told the crew held explosives. With the full ransom collected from Seattle banks and 4 parachutes aboard, the plane headed for Reno. It took 3.5 hours, slow for a jet, but the hijacker had given detailed flight instructions. The rear stairwell was open all the way. It arrived at Reno in shreds. The crew, here being debriefed by the FBI, was told to fly low over Oregon's flatlands with the flaps down. The speed dropped to 200 miles per hour. Somewhere, the hijacker parachuted away with the money. The crew had little to say.
We gave the information to the authorities, and we just don't want to discuss it any further.
Have you been told by the FBI not to discuss?
No, they handle their investigation, and my company would rather have it released through them.
Tina, were you with the rest of the crew during the flight after you left the ground the last time?
Yes, I went up to the cockpit.
None of you were within sight of the hijacker, right?
Right. We already talked about it, and the captain, filled in.
How did you surmise that he was not on the plane when he landed in Reno?
Well, a search was made of the plane immediately after landing.
As we understood it, he could have gotten off as the plane taxied before it came up here. How did the crew know he wasn't on when it touched ground?
Over the following months, the search transitioned from active pursuit to analytical reconstruction. Thousands of tips poured in from across the country, each one investigated, most leading nowhere. Maps were redrawn, wind models recalculated, and drop zones re-estimated countless times. Yet every new theory only reinforced the same conclusion. Whether by skill, luck, or fatal miscalculation, Cooper had vanished without a trace. The storm that night had erased him so completely that even decades later, the case remained suspended between legend and loss. Investigators quickly concluded that the hijacker possessed a strong familiarity with the aircraft itself. His calm demeanor, precise instructions to the flight crew, and specific demands regarding airspeed, altitude, and flap configuration suggested more than casual knowledge. He knew the Boeing 727 was uniquely equipped with a rear air stair that could be deployed in flight, a detail unfamiliar to the general public at the time. This level of awareness led authorities to believe Cooper had prior aviation experience, possibly military, commercial, or technical, and that his actions were calculated rather than impulsive.
Well, D.W. Cooper's mission ended and the manhunt started in the Pacific Northwest. The FBI pinpointing 2 drop zones along the flight path somewhere between Seattle and Portland. His mid-flight escape made famous by so many Hollywood writers throughout the years. Follow money, right? Well, D.B. Cooper made off with about $200,000 in cash. That's $1.2 million today, and some of it was later found buried along the Columbia River, so we know he made it down there. And remember, these other key pieces of evidence were also included. Clip-on tie left on the plane. One of the 4 parachutes that D.B. Cooper was given as part of his ransom, and all 3 of those clues popped up in newly declassified FBI documents, almost 500 pages detailing those early witness descriptions, all kinds of potential new suspects, even letters from D.B. Cooper himself.
The case quickly grew cold. Then, on the 10th of February 1980, nearly 9 years later, an unexpected development emerged. 8-year-old Brian Ingram, visiting Tena Bar along the Columbia River with his family, discovered 3 bundles of $20 bills buried in mud and silt. The total amounted to $5,800. Serial numbers matched the ransom list perfectly. Analysis suggested that the bills had been submerged or buried for years, partially eroded by water and silt, their condition inconsistent with immediate circulation. No other bills from the ransom were ever recovered. The find reignited discussion about Cooper's fate. Had he survived and intentionally deposited some cash? Or had the money become detached from his rig during the jump, washed downstream, and gradually emerged? The D.B. Cooper saga exemplifies a crime both simple in execution and complex in aftermath. A single man, armed with nothing more than cash, a briefcase, and nerves of steel, leveraged knowledge, composure, and circumstance to execute what remains the only unsolved skyjacking in American history. Cooper's actions influenced aviation security and criminal methodology, yet they also left the enduring question: did he die in the forests of Washington, or did he vanish into obscurity, a man who defied authorities, weather, and gravity itself? Even as files continue to be released and amateur investigators analyze old leads, the case maintains an enduring enigma. Cooper may never be identified, and perhaps that is part of the enduring fascination. A tie full of industrial secrets, and a man whose actions inspired endless speculation, D.B. Cooper remains the last great unsolved skyjacking, a story where every answer uncovers yet more questions.